All right, I'm curious, Jeannie. I am curious. We've talked about this. You had a very comfortable church life, North Point, Willow Creek, and all these mega churches, and and their suburban mega churches, and then all of a sudden you said, "Nope, we're going to do something different." How in the world did Soul City come about? Tell us walk us through that whole process of how Soul City Church came about. It's because it's really fun, it's really exciting, and there are a few bumps along the way, and I'd love to hear all
Oh
about it.
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, leave it to God to be the author of always making sure that we don't just slip into comfort. That we live these beautifully courageous, faith-filled lives. And I don't even know, Joey, if I thought that my life was comfortable
Huh.
or as you just mentioned, we worked at Willow for 11 years, then we worked at North Point for almost 5 years, and I'm just so grateful for that 15-year run to be in communities that value leadership development, to be in communities that are so intentional about the work that they do to expand the gospel. So what a blessing. But I think that there was a bit of me that was sleepwalking when it came to really living into the fullness of what it meant for me to walk in faith, what it meant for me to have so much trust and intentional followership of Jesus. And I think a lot of people in professional Christian ministry can at times live a sleepwalking life with their own faith. They're
Yeah.
doing the work of God professionally, and at times that can dull the work of God inside of them. And
Ooh, say that again. That was really good. Say that again.
yeah, doing the work of God, oftentimes, if we're not careful, ends up dulling the work of God inside of us.
Wow.
And I think that was a bit of our story, and so insert God wrecking the plot line of my life. And I had a 2-year old and a 4-year old, and my husband and I had this sense that God was asking us to start a church from scratch, like from nothing, from our living room. And so, yeah, we were at North Point at the time, moved back to Chicago, which is where I'm from, but moved into the city of Chicago, moved to the West Loop, which is one of the fastest growing neighborhoods of millennials and now Gen Z. And yeah, so while there, we started this church in our living room, 2-year old, 4-year old. Had no idea how much I really needed God to answer my prayers.
Hmm.
Like it was a walking on water experience. I remember so many times in those early few months of the church, like saying to Jarrett, like, maybe we should just call Andy and say, can we come back?
Andy Stanley at North Point. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
our
Yeah,
pastor.
yeah.
Like we don't know what we were doing. This is really hard. Oh my gosh! Like remember when you used to put checks in our bank account every 2 weeks, and we had benefits, and we had all these things, and it was a and you know this, you're an entrepreneur, so very similar when you step off the ledge, right? When you step out of the boat, when you really, really, really take a risk, and you are so dependent on God to answer those prayers, I think it's one of the greatest things that anyone can do for their faith. I wouldn't change it for the world because it put me in a posture of dependence, and that's a really, really, really good posture for anyone to be in. It's vulnerable, it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and yet it's where we actually get to practice what I think is critical to a life of faith, and that is surrender.
Yeah. I'm going to hear about the difficulty in that, because especially when you have a calling, you believe you specifically have a calling, there's almost inside of that, you think, well, everything's going to be okay then. but it's not. So there's almost this juxtaposition of like, well, I know I'm supposed to be here, but that doesn't in any way equate to it being easy. And I'm sure that some of the difficulty, you had to anticipate some difficulty, but was the challenge and difficulty, was it different than you expected? It's not like this big heroic going to go take over the city. Instead, it probably comes to you in a bunch of different ways, like practical
Yeah.
ways. What were some of those like difficult things in the beginning that maybe took you off guard?
Yeah, I think one of the you're exactly right. You know, there's a moment of calling, and gosh, that is so critical to anyone taking a step in their life. Calling, uh, this sense of purpose, right? And so having that clarity, like, and I know I'm supposed to do this, is something to always come back to when it does get hard,
Yeah.
when it does get difficult. And so I'm very grateful for calling, for purpose, for a compass, if you will. You know, like I know this is the direction I am to walk, especially when the terrain gets hard, or when challenges come, and they always will. And I remember in those early days, some of the early challenges were just it was so clear to us what God was asking us to do. And we were needing to make that clear to many others, right? People that were going to join in this effort. So, vision casting, fundraising, finding facility, setting a healthy framework and structure and strategy, and clarifying all the things that we are going to say yes to, which means you have to get really clear on all the things that you're going to say no to.
Yeah.
I think one of the big things I remember early on realizing it is a very different seat to sit in when you are the leader.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember sending either a text or an email or something to Andy saying, "Wow, this is a really different seat. Like when you're the leader,
Yeah.
and it stops at you, and people are looking to you to say, so what are we going to do?" There's a different level of loneliness.
Hmm.
There's a different level of pressure. There's a different level of really having to lead yourself. You know, nobody else is leading you.
Yeah.
And so you really have to up your self leadership game. And that requires a lot of tenacity. That requires a lot of endurance, a lot of because not every day feels like that high calling day,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
know, there's lots of days that are just like normal. They're Wednesday
Right.
at 2 o'clock,
It's
and
work. Yeah.
nothing radical is happening, right? And you're like, I want that feeling of
Yeah.
that calling, that purpose. And it's like, no, you just got to move something from A to B and be faithful to get it done, right?
Right.
Because people are depending on you to do that. So I would say those were some of the early challenges of
Yeah.
just learning how to live that way as a leader. And at the same time, right? I'm married. I'm partnering with my husband on
Yeah.
this church. We have a 2-year-old. We have a 4-year-old. So life is full. We live in a fast-moving city. Every other challenge that people have with friendships and family and all those things. And so learning how to hold all of that and hold it lightly. And going back to what I said earlier, to continue to not professionalize the work of God, and
Yeah.
for it to continue to be really sincere, authentic, vulnerable, raw and real in my own life, so that what's pouring out is authentic, raw,
Yeah.
and real to others.
How do you do that? Tell me about some of the daily disciplines. Maybe it may be different today than before. We're going to get into what's here now in your book, and I want to hear about some of those, maybe the early days, those daily disciplines, the practical habits. I've been amazed as we've been talking with people on this podcast. people like Justin Whitmel early who say that it was their habits and it was their disciplines that brought them out of dark places, and that you would think that it's sometimes a feeling, this overwhelming feeling that gets to you, but it really is the practical thing. So what were some of those daily disciplines where you could stay refreshed and renewed, and making sure that you had enough, your cup was full so you could pour it out to others?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big fan of James Clear and
Yeah.
Atomic Habits, and just the wisdom of his writing. And I think I hope I don't butcher this quote. I think one of the things that he says is, we do not rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems.
So good.
And if that isn't true, I don't know what is. It is just so true, because I love setting goals. I love I'm a natural visionary
Yeah.
on the thinking wavelength. I'm a 9.7. I got an
Wow.
idea like every few moments. And so vision, idea, possibility is where I love to live. Um, and somebody like that is not going to move any of those things forward if they don't have supporting systems or habits. And so I would say, there are some that are are small and not noticeable. Things like drinking a glass of water before I have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
It's just the reminder of how important it is to stay hydrated. A gratitude journal. There's always something to be grateful for. And there's so much science, neuroscience around the power of gratitude,
Yeah.
and how you cannot actually be grateful and anxious at the same moment. And so in those early days of, the anxiety of like, where are we going to meet? How are we going to, you know, pay the lease on this huge warehouse? How are people going to come? Are people going to give? Are we going to be able to hire a staff? Are we, all of these
Yeah.
things, right? It's so critical to make sure that you are looking at the things to be grateful for. So the practice of gratitude is one. So I just keep it's called the 5-minute journal. And I just literally in the morning write out the things that I'm grateful for. And it takes 5 minutes, but it really does make a difference. I would say another pattern early on that really, really helped was getting in a circle of people that were also leaders, but I was not leading that circle.
That's really good.
So, really being in a community of people that that didn't need me, if you will.
Sure.
They didn't need my leadership, they didn't need my direction, they didn't need my shepherding, they didn't need that. There's a place for me to just be Jeannie.
Yeah.
Not Jeannie the pastor, not Jeannie the leader, not anything other than just me. And that practice was really, really helpful. Of course, exercise, spending time reading, not for the sake of a sermon that I was preparing.
Yeah.
That's a hard one. It's a real hard one,
I
because
believe
there's
that.
always something that you're writing or content that you're developing. And so it's like you can almost like squeeze your research into those things as well. This is good, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes I found, oh, you're just doing this for what you're producing, not for who you're becoming.
I've wondered about that because it seems like if someone is producing a lot of content, whether it's sermons or videos or blogs or something, it's almost as if you have this, like you have a great family moment, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're immediately, oh, this would be make a great blog content, instead of like,
Right.
hold on one second, just freaking be
Right.
here. You know what I mean?
Yes,
That has to
exactly.
be a challenge, right?
Oh, it is. It absolutely is. And it's like that, like you whip out your phone, right?
Right.
You're having such a great moment and you're like,
Yeah.
I want to take a picture of this, right? And it's like the second you do it, and not all the time, because I do love capturing memories, but
Yeah.
sometimes it can actually make the moment leave,
Yeah.
versus that moment actually be exactly what it is meant to be.
Yeah.
A moment to just be present with your people, experiencing whatever it is that you're experiencing. So those are a few of the things. Walking is a big one for
I
me.
like that.
Like this summer, I just walked my neighborhood in the morning and listened to the Psalms.
Hmm.
And it was a way for me to experience scripture in a whole different kind of way. I downloaded it on an app where this British guy read the Psalms to me. So
Not
I'm just
bad.
walking my neighborhood and some British guy is reading the Psalms, and it just, I've read the Psalms many times before, but it was a fresh way to receive it, to not like sit and read, but to actually have it read to me. So I've found over the years I have to change up some of my practices and my habits so that they don't become stale.
Yeah.
Uh, but those are a few that
Yeah.
I think um, allow me to shift. I think presence is so critical to how we live with one another, and it's so challenging to actually remind ourselves to be here
Yeah.
now. And like I literally wear a necklace around my neck that says presence, just as a like, I put it on in the morning, like this is the only day that will be this day. So how are you going to give yourself to whoever you interact with? How are you going to be present? And so that that is a huge shift in my life, and really a lot of that came, Joey, from recognizing that I wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean,
Of
that's the
course.
honest truth.
Yeah.
I was either rehashing the past or I was rehearsing the future, and I was not receiving the gift of this now moment, which, when you think about it, is the only thing we have.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. The past is gone. The future is not certain. Exactly. This is all we have. I want to hear real quick before we dive into the book. I want to hear about what it was like with Jarrett during that time, um, with kids who are 2 and 4. I'm a firm believer that it's wartime. You got to have a different mentality, and that's without launching a venture, whether it's a church or a business. And those things are challenging enough as they are. What were some of the things that came up that were difficult during that time? How did you weather it? And maybe someone who maybe is listening, who would be in a similar spot. Hey, I'm launching something new. My kids are in a similar age or whatever it is. What would you say to them, not only on what you all did together, maybe what you did as a spouse and what Jarrett did as a spouse, and maybe even those challenges that you had to overcome?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say specifically for our marriage, and we love partnering together, and it has been a wild ride, and it has been a great adventure, and I wouldn't say it's for everybody. I don't know if everybody is wired in such a way, and their marriage and their gifts are wired in such a way that they should both be partners at work and partners at home. But for us, it was the right step for us. And we always would say we need to work harder behind the scenes so that what we offer to others is the overflow of the good work that we're doing to be healthy and whole as a married couple and as the co-pastors of this church. So early on, we just even set up some good parameters. We're not one another's boss. We both report to the board. We felt like that was really critical early on to not put some kind of weird hierarchy into our relationship, because we were both equally leading this organization. And so, we separately report to our board. We have separate job descriptions. So we're not like, there's not strange overlap in the organization. It helps people know that when they're meeting with me, they're really meeting with me, versus, oh, I guess if I meet with Jeannie, it just automatically means whatever she
Yeah.
thinks Jarrett thinks too, so that our individuality and the offerings that we bring as leaders, we made it really clear in the organization what he was going to oversee, what I was going to oversee. We tried to really keep our date night every week.
So even through that,
And
you all were good about that, huh?
yeah, we
Wow.
were. And I mean, of course there were times where,
Sure.
it didn't happen, but and Jared is really good at drawing the boundaries of saying, okay, we've just been standing in our kitchen making dinner, and the entire time we've been talking about Soul City. Like,
Yeah.
Let's be here in our
Right.
kitchen making dinner for our kids and our family. Soul City doesn't need to be in this space, and so we had to really learn those boundaries and draw them for ourselves, and then practice them, right?
Yeah.
Back to the James Clear quote, right? Like, what is our system going to be around how do we protect this beautiful entity called, we call ourselves Team Stevens. How do we protect this thing? Because this thing was here long before Soul City. It'll be here long after Soul City. And I want to be the only spouse to my husband. I want to be the only mother to my children. That is a role distinctly
Yeah.
called, that God called me to. One day Soul City will probably have a new pastor, even though I started it and founded it. I don't want to give all of me to it. And I will say early on, any startup, it feels like it takes everything and then some.
Yeah.
And I think early on, a lot of our mishaps and a lot of our challenges were when we just gave Soul City um, maybe more than we should have. And I'll never forget when we left North Point. I remember Andy saying to me, "Hey, 80% is good enough." And I'm like,
Interesting.
"Okay, I need to remember that," because there's this tension, especially for creators, and I'm sure you feel this way too, Joey. You think, okay, if I tweak one more thing, maybe I can make it just a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, right? And it's like, and what is the cost to that?
Yeah.
And so learning how to know when to be done, learning how to know when to stop the conversation, um learning how to know, that you've given what you can give, and to really with peace walk away
Yeah.
from that. I struggled with that. I tend to err on workaholic
Sure.
tendencies, and so I can just like keep going. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, so like there's a umpteen amount of energy and wanting to pour into something, and so that has been a real growth for me. Rest has been something that I've had to work at. It's not something that I'm naturally good at. Sabbath was not something that I was naturally good at when we started Soul City. And I've had to really discipline myself to learn how to do that. And so much of what you and I've connected about even is the power and the gift of these little devices, right, that
Yeah.
are in our pockets that you can do so much good through. I can, um, it's amazing. I can send a quick text to somebody in the Soul City community, and encourage them and support them. And that would have been way more complicated, 20, 30 years ago. And, but it also has a downside.
Yeah.
Anyone can reach me at any time.
Right.
And that isn't always good either.
It's so true. We say, it's interesting when you put your phone down and when you really are present, you're signaling to the person across from you that there are 7 billion people who could theoretically reach me through this thing, and you're more important than all 7 billion of them right
Yeah.
now. So it's that moment, that bit of presence. Fast forward us through. This was how long you all moved to. You started Soul City in what year?
So Soul City is 12 years old.
Okay.
So we started in 2010.
2010, you built up. I'm sure things were going great. A little thing called COVID-19 hit that changed the
Right.
complexion of things. And then, so now on the other side of COVID, or for the most part on the other side of COVID, what is the state of Soul City?
Yeah, we really experienced the intensity of COVID probably different than,
Sure,
well, I mean, wherever you're at in the country, you experienced COVID.
but you're in the heart of
Um,
Chicago.
I'm in the
Yeah.
heart of Chicago, so we experienced it pretty intensely. Our church was physically shut down for 18 months, and
Wow.
so we 100% pivoted online. And and like every other church, had to learn a whole new way to care for, shepherd, um, and love people. At the time, we were, uh, getting ready to launch a few new campuses. Right before COVID started. And so we had to pause that. And instead, we opened up what we now call the House of Hope, which is a way to give care and support through hospitality, hope, and healing, through meals, through support with what we call our Justice Center. So we have a bunch of attorneys in
Oh,
our
cool.
church that will come alongside of people that need aid at a greatly reduced price. We have a resume writing experience for people that are looking for jobs. They're struggling with, being houseless. And so we come alongside and support. We have a resource closet filled with immediate uh, active resources that people would need in the moment. So transit cards or coats or just basic supplies. And so that all occurred through COVID, which
Wow.
is so cool, right? This thing that was so challenging and so difficult actually ended up birthing something that has become so beautiful and has become such a support to so many people in the community. And what's so cool is so many people come to the House of Hope that will maybe never step foot in
Sure.
inside of a service at Soul City, but they've been loved and blessed by the work of Soul City Church. And so, yeah, a lot has come out of it, but I will say it has been quite a
Hmm.
journey to be a leader through COVID, and to constantly uh, discern and determine what is the right thing to do. With a thousand options as to how to navigate through this thing. It was quite a journey for any leader, but ourselves included. And so, just a few months ago, we added back we had 3 services pre-COVID, a couple thousand people attending in downtown Chicago. And just a few months ago, we added back a 3rd service. So it's taken us
Wow.
almost 3 years to rebound back to where we were. And we're right about there again. But I will say, um, the behavior and the habits of people have shifted in COVID, and how people connect in community, how people engage with a local church has really shifted globally, I believe.
Yeah.
And so the state of the church is really, I believe we will look back on this season and we will say that was a turning point moment in the life of the Big C church for
Wow.
how people gather. I think the church will always continue on. It's continued on for 2,000 years, but how we gather and how we connect in community, I think we are living through turning point moments.
So amazing. I totally believe that. Something jumps out to me about you that I love, and you probably know this about yourself, but that was the second instance of something I noticed. You are high on vision, you're high on future, but you always go back to systems and practicality. So
Mm.
you talked about in your marriage, I mean, you have, grand aspirations for your marriage, but then, okay, what are our systems for us?
Mm-hmm.
Let's schedule a date night. And then you talked about during COVID, you're a visionary for a church, you are an entrepreneur, but then you went back to okay, let's meet the practical needs of the community around us.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you did the same thing with your book. I mean, your book, you had this feeling of presence, which can kind of feel ambiguous and amorphous, and then you took it and you made it I think your book is brilliant in the way it connects 2 different things that I love. And we're going to go through them because the subtitle or the book itself is called What's Here Now, and the subtitle is How to Stop Rehashing the Past and Rehearsing the Future and Start Receiving the Present. So you take some concepts that are so fascinating. This is brilliant how you did this. All these concepts, and then you related them. This is how you live in the past. This is how you live in the future. And we'll get to those, but I'm curious to begin. I think that writing a book has to be one of the most vulnerable experiences that anybody could possibly do. You're taking your own personal experience, you're trying to order the words in a way that makes it appealing to read. And then you're saying, hey, here, world, go ahead and judge me. Go ahead and judge everything about the form and the substance and everything. What is the vulnerable process of writing and releasing a book like?
Mm, you're exactly right. It is mega vulnerable. And I told quite a few very vulnerable stories
You did.
in the book. And I just, I and maybe this is the gift of listening and reading a ton of Brene Brown. So I'll give her all the credit
I'm a
right
big
now.
Brene fan.
I'm a big Brene fan, and she just really embodies and teaches the reality that no one is really drawn to our egoic selves. We're drawn to our true selves in one another. We're drawn to the real, the authentic, the vulnerable, and that moment where somebody really confesses or says, "That was really hard for me," and another person says, "Yeah, me too." That is authentic connection. And that is what humans are looking for. They are looking to belong. And so I'm not looking to sit across from somebody that gives me a shiny picture of how amazing their life is and how
Right.
everything is perfect. And, their life just from morning till dusk, everything goes according to plan. I'm actually drawn to the person that's like, yeah, it all kind of fell apart yesterday
Yeah.
when we were trying to get out of the house. And I'm like, oh my gosh, me too. Like, how do you do that with your kids, right? And so in the big things and in the small things, we are drawn to the authentic, vulnerable self. And so I knew in the writing of this book that if I just offered my shiny, spectacular self and it looked like everything has always gone according to plan and I have all of the correct answers as to how to be the most single uh, present person ever to walk the earth, that it actually wouldn't connect with people, that I needed to write from my own real journey of trying to figure presence out. I am not writing as an expert. I'm writing as a fellow journeyman on the path, trying to figure out how do we live present in this one most extraordinary lives we've been gifted to live. So I really chose, and I would put that at the top of my page each time I sat down to write, like, be present. It just, I would write different people's names at the top of the page that reminded me of people that I wanted to read these words and they would feel seen. I think that's one of the desires of humans is we just want to be seen. Like, do you see me? Do you know me? Do you receive me? Do you accept me? And so I wanted people, when they were reading these words, to feel those feelings like, she gets me, she sees me, she knows me, her life looks like my life. And whatever, wisdom I have gathered over the years, to offer that in a humble way, not
Yeah.
in a I've figured it all out kind of way.
It comes across when you said that need to be seen. I think of the story of Abraham and Sarah, and then Hagar, the servant, and she runs off after some issues with Abraham, and then God comes to her and she says to him, she says, "You're the God
Yeah.
who sees me."
Yeah.
And how, I mean, that's embedded within us, that need for
Yes.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And what an amazing concept. Your You go through things that keep us in the past, that keep us rehashing the past, and then rehearsing the future. And again, I'll say this, and then you just have to read the book to really fully grasp it. But there are things like, you say, blame, shame, grief, bitterness, and guilt. Those all rehash the past.
Mm-hmm.
and those are concepts I wouldn't have necessarily connected with that.
Yeah.
I would love to hear about a few of those things. Maybe whatever jumps out from what you'd like to
Yeah.
highlight, blame, shame, grief, bitterness, guilt, any one or multiple of those, that and the way that it can pull us back to the past.
Yeah. Well, one of the powerful things about presence is that if it's not happening now, it's not happening. And I'll say that again. If it's not happening now, it's not happening. And yet, most of us, we tend to live in the not happenings. We're thinking about something that's going to occur in, you know, 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 years, or we're thinking about something that happened 2 hours ago, 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, right?
Yeah,
And so our mental construct keeps us from the now. And yet, the now is the place where God lives.
yeah.
God dwells in this now moment. I love what Father Richard Rohr says. He says, we cannot attain the presence of God because we're already in the presence of God. What's
Wow.
absent is awareness.
Mm,
And so many of us, we are missing out on that awareness because we are rehashing the past or rehearsing the future. And so what I did, Joey, was I just kind of looked like, what are the ways that I rehash the past? And that's where I came up with those 5 things. Blame is a big one. And blame is just simply wanting to direct personal responsibility to someone or something else, right? Like you're just like,
that's right.
I don't like this feeling. I don't like this thing that happened. Who can I put this on, right? Who else can take this? Can I
Right.
put this on a person? Can I put this on the traffic? Can I put this on whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to feel this feeling of blame. So, how can I get rid of it? Shame is really similar in that it's no one likes to feel shame because ultimately shame is self-hatred at my expense. Like if you spell out shame, self-hatred at my
Oh,
expense,
like that.
that's how I define shame. And shame is this way of not believing we are enough, right? Not believing that we are worthy of love. And it keeps us from this now moment. Guilt is another one. And it's funny because blame, shame, and guilt, they're almost like these triplets, right? That show up in our lives, but they have different powers, and how they they manifest themselves. Like blame is it's your fault. You know, guilt says like it's my fault, and shame is I'm just always at fault. Like my very essence is the problem. Blame is you were wrong, guilt is I was wrong, and shame is I am wrong.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and so those three, they really they manifest differently, but they show up so similarly in our lives. So blame, shame, guilt. There's grief, which is that deep sorrow from a loss in our past, and it changes how we live in the present. And if we don't do our grief work, and grief it's so painful and it's so hard, and so many people choose to not do grief work because it's so painful and because it's so hard, but then it's showing up in their present life,
Yeah.
right? It's hijacking your everyday living. And then there's bitterness, right? Bitterness is really a grudge that has a hold on your heart. Bitterness, another word for it is unforgiveness. And all 5 of those, they keep us locked up in the past, missing out on the present moment.
That is powerful, powerful, powerful. Shame, that concept of shame shows up and it's so unsuspecting, it's so insidious, it just seeps
Yeah.
into our, to your point, it seeps into our psyche until we all of a sudden believe that. That's a really hard one. It really is. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about with my relationship with my kids and how I combat that. I know that is a natural thing to think I am wrong, and
Yeah.
it's that is amazingly powerful. And then you go to the future. So we're rehearsing the future. And I like to say to my kids, so my daughter she has an ear appointment. By the way, my daughter, she also goes by Gigi, also who
Mm.
your daughter goes by.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
So she has an ear doctor appointment, and she is living that ear doctor appointment today, tomorrow, until it happens on
Yep.
Friday. She's
Totally.
living it now. And I think, why would you want to experience this twice? Because if it's
Yep.
as bad as you think it's going to be, then you're experiencing something bad twice. And if it's not bad at all, then you're experiencing a bad thing that won't actually be bad. So it's those
Yeah.
things that rehearsing, and I've heard a line on fear, which fear is a and worry, they come to us as a fully formed story. So they come
Yep.
to us when we're thinking about them. We already have the story written, and the
Yep.
story is never exactly as we imagine them.
No.
So you
Yeah.
talk about worry, denial, pretending, obligation, waiting, and control. Talk
Yeah.
about how those take us out of the present by rehearsing the future. I'd love to hear about those.
Yeah, I love how you were talking about, that relationship with fear and worry. And I like to say that worry is living in a not yet that's worse than your now. And
Gosh, that's good.
it's
You
exactly
say
what
things better than I do.
no, it's exactly what you described with your daughter, right? The
Yeah,
not yet, the ear appointment. It's worse. She's making it worse than her now, right? It hasn't happened yet. She doesn't know how it's gonna all go down. But this is what we do, right? We literally create our not yets in our mind, right? They truly have not occurred. So the only place where we can manifest them are in our mind and in our thoughts. And then they move through to our body. We feel them in our body
yeah,
and we experience them in our emotions. And so the body, the mind, and the heart, they really do have an interplay, which we'll talk about, in a moment, in the power of receiving the present. But that's all worry is. It's living in a not yet that's worse than your now. And our world is riddled with it. I mean, just
yeah.
riddled with it. I experience it. You experience it. Our kids experience it. It's why anxiety is at an all-time high. The news cycles are filled with not yets that are worse than our nows, right? And so we're
Yeah,
just digesting worry. We are just on a steady diet of it.
that's so
So
true.
that's one of the big ways that we rehearse the future. Denial. And denial is really this defense mechanism to delay pain and avoid transformation. It's kind of this like, oh, I don't want to have to face that. I don't want to have to do that. And so we just keep having denial over whatever, pain it is that we know we need to walk into. And really what it does is it avoids growth. It avoids transformation because we may think, oh, that's going to be too hard. That's going to be too difficult. And so I'm just going to deny what needs to take place with that. Pretending is another one, which is just a place where we camouflage our authentic selves. And really, we all want approval. We want control. We want security. And the only places where we actually find that real enoughness is in relationship with God. But whenever we're pretending, we try to get that for ourselves, right?
Yeah,
I try to get all of that approval from something else, that control from something else, that security from something else. And so it's this game of masking and pretending and camouflaging, and it keeps us from the present moment. And it's also exhausting.
right.
It is exhausting to pretend. Obligation is another one. It's really believing that you have no choices. It's really living with should,
Yeah,
as the master, as the driver. I should do this, versus I can do this. I'm invited to do this. And should is just never a healthy place to live from. And then control is really just taking authority into your own hands so that you 100% influence whatever the outcome is. And it keeps us from the posture of surrender. And these are all ways that we rehearse the future and we leave the present moment. We
Yeah.
literally are like, this moment is not where I want to be. I am going to go out into the future. And it ends up causing so much pain every single time we do it.
And it's so habitual. It's such a normal part of how we act. It's not like we're
Hmm.
consciously sabotaging ourselves. We're sabotaging ourselves. And
Yep.
then the antidote is receiving the present. You talk about, ways that you do that in areas where you receive the present, your emotions, your thoughts, your body, gratitude, belonging. Would love to hear for those one. I should just leave it as a teaser. You got to read the book to find the last part, but walk us through some of those on how
Yeah.
you receive the present.
Yeah. It really starts with, our mind, our body,
Yeah.
and our heart. And so when it comes to the heart, right, your emotions, it's an emotion is really just energy in motion. That's really all an emotion is. It's a movement of energy, and it's growing. And so, um, being able to learn how to name, okay, what am I feeling here in my heart? So much of what I teach in the book is just helping people discern and determine, oh, I'm feeling sadness, or I'm feeling excitement, I'm feeling concern, I'm feeling anger, and helping people learn how to just name, this
Yeah.
is what's going on. I had a great conversation with my 14-year-old daughter last night, and she was navigating through a bunch of different things with some friends, and with her volleyball, with school, with some obligations that she has that she was feeling overwhelmed with. And I was like, Gigi, do you know what you're feeling right now? She's like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, let's just breathe for a minute. And then she's like, yeah, I think I'm sad. And I was
Mm.
like, awesome. I'm so glad. Like, what does that sadness feel like in your body? Which then, when we ask the question, what's here now? I start with, okay, what are you feeling in your heart? Um, you know, what are you sensing in your body? She's like, well, it just feels heavy in my chest. I feel overwhelmed. And I'm like, what are the thoughts that go with that? She's like, well, I feel like I'm letting people down. I haven't talked to this friend in a while. And I've got this tournament this weekend, and this homework. And so we were able to just kind of pull the thread of all of that and come back into the present moment. Right. And so
Wow.
that's what's powerful about asking this question, what's here now? Because the emotion is just energy in motion. A thought is just the process by which your mind considers something. But so many of us, we believe that every thought we think we should believe.
Yeah.
and
Right.
and we shouldn't. And I like to explain that thoughts are literally like airplanes overhead. And some neuroscientists believe that we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts in a day. Can you imagine if you allowed every 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts to land on the runway of your mind? Right,
Right.
that would be a very congested airport. And
Right.
yet so many of us, that's what we're doing. We're
Hmm.
just we're having a thought. Because we had the thought, we believe it's true. And and then our minds feel so overwhelmed, it then affects our body, it affects our emotions. And so learning how to actually clear those thoughts, right, to say that thought is not of service to me, that thought is not true, that thought is not going to bring healing or hope, or allow me to move forward. uh, a thought ultimately is harmless until we believe it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just something that goes overhead, but it becomes harmful if we start to believe it. And I think about, in Second Corinthians, where it says, take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. So many of us, I just wonder, do you take your thoughts captive, or do your thoughts take you captive? Because
Right.
I think so many of us, we allow our thoughts to take us captive. Um, so those are the things to bring yourself back into the present moment, to really ask yourself, what's here now, with with my thoughts, what's here now in my heart, what's here now in my body, and then to actually practice gratitude, to find something in that moment that can give you gratitude. Gratitude is ultimately what makes us well. You think about the story in Luke where Jesus heals the lepers, right? And and most of them left, but one came back, and one came back and said, "Thank you."
Hmm.
And it's so interesting to me what Jesus says to him. He says, "Rise and go, your faith has made you well." And I believe that what Jesus is really saying in that moment is that it is gratitude that makes us well.
Wow.
That practice of gratitude actually is what gives us peace and what gives us perspective. Because we can always kind of look up and be like, okay, what provision is here? You can be in the most dire of situations and still see something has been provided for me, even if it's just, there is breath in my lungs that has been provided for me. To look out, look at, there has to be a person, right? What is one person that I can be grateful for? What can you look in and go, okay, I can see that God has taken care of this thing in my life. And so just that practice of gratitude, it's this opportunity to be reminded that peaceful circumstances aren't what create gratitude. Gratitude is actually what creates peaceful
I like
circumstances.
that. That's
And
so good.
it really is the antidote to anxiety in our life as well. When we're in those moments of worry and in those moments of living in the not yet that's worse than your now, gratitude is often that antidote to those moments of anxiety. And so those practices of paying attention to what's here now in my mind, what's here now in my heart, what's here now in my body, how can I practice gratitude, which ultimately leads us back to belonging, which is this just beautiful ability to see that we belong to
Yeah.
one another. Mother Teresa said, if we have no peace, it's because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. And I think that so many of us, we know that vulnerability is critical to belonging, but so many of us stay isolated.
Yeah.
And isolation plus vulnerability is what equals fear. But when you put connection to vulnerability, that's what actually gives us courage. And it's what we need to start to come back into this present moment and participate in our healing work. We participate in our
Sure.
healing work. We participate in coming back to the present moment. It's what I've told you guys, it's what I love so much about what you're doing with Oro, because I have to go put my phone in that box. I participate
Yeah.
in taking responsibility to say, I am going to choose presence.
Hmm.
I am going to choose to connect with people. I'm going to choose sitting here and drinking my cup of coffee and not, numbing my mind and scrolling,
Yeah.
but instead just breathing or reading or meditating or being still or giving myself the gift of 3 minutes of silence, right? I participate because those things make me well.
Yeah.
They make me well.
That's so good. Excuse me. This book is a gift. It really is a gift to the world. It's beautiful. It's one I even think about hearing, even though I've read it, hearing you talk about it again there with my kids and my life, how it's so practical. Again, back to my earlier point, it's so vision casting, but it's also so practical. So it is a gift, and everybody needs to read it. Um, One quick question, a total pivot. What's your favorite family movie? The Stevens' favorite family movie?
A Stevens family favorite movie. I know it's not Christmas time, but we love Elf.
Oh, it's so
We
good.
watch it every year. We laugh at the same things every year. We quote the same things. We love that movie. So that is a family favorite for
That's a
sure.
wonderful one. And then another pivot. This is a question we ask everybody. It's intentionally open-ended and vague. But what does RO is conversation? The RO podcast is conversations with people who strive to live intentionally. What does intentionality mean to you?
Hmm. Yeah, intentionality is going back to what we talked about a little bit ago. It's really seeing clearly and seeing people clearly. Last night it's simple things too. I don't even know if it needs to be majorly complex, Joey.
Yeah,
We at the center of our table, we've got a book of 5,000 questions, and it's so easy. I bought it at Target. It's not even a special book, right? It's just this book of 5,000 questions. And I know that our kids, uh, they're they're going to sit down at dinner, and we're going to go about the day, have these 45 minutes here around the dinner table. I want those moments to be intentional.
yeah,
So we'll pick up the book, and I'll say, okay, each person pick a question. We've got a jar in the center of our table. Once a week we write one thing down that we're grateful for that week. I've got a little canister of mustard seeds. Every once in a while I'll say, hey, what's one thing that you need some faith for in your life right now? It's send Last night, I mentioned my daughter was struggling with a few things. And before I went to bed, I just had this little prompt that I wanted her to wake up. Yeah, I feel tender saying this. I
mm,
wanted her to wake up, and when she looked in the mirror, she saw words of truth. And so last night, I went into her bathroom and just grabbed a post it note and wrote, I don't know, just 20 things that are true about her, and
wow,
put it on her mirror. Um, to me, that's intentional.
mm,
It's seeing people, and it's seeing people in such a way that you want them to see themselves too.
that's
You want them to be able to see, if they're not seeing clearly, because listen, there's lots of moments that I don't see myself clearly.
sure.
I struggle with all those things that I wrote about in the book. This book wrote me before I wrote this book. And Yeah, when we love one another with that kind of seeing and that kind of intentionality, that is what heals us. We participate in the work of God, bringing healing into the life of one another. So to me, that is what intentionality is. It's
Wow,
a seeing and then
that
doing
is,
something about it.
yeah, that's right. That is beautiful. Jeannie, people are going to want to go pick up the book, What's Here Now. I would encourage also people to also go and get your 2023 vision guide. It's wonderful. I've ordered it myself. And how can they connect with you on socials, through your website? We'll put all this in the show notes as well. But
Yeah,
as people want to follow up,
absolutely.
what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, you can get the book anywhere. Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, wherever. And you can find me at my website, jeanniestevens.com. I've got lots of resources there. And then on social channels, I'm just at Jeanne Stevens. And so yeah, I would love to connect with anybody.
Jeannie, thank you so much for joining the RO podcast. This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joey.